Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I am joined here by my co-host and producer, Holly Deschenes. Today, we're getting into the new year, so we're filming this on the 2nd. So obviously this is the big time where people try to make changes. I think change should be an ongoing process all the time. We talked a lot about reflecting on the past year and getting clear on, what went well and some things you might want to shift moving into this year. And it's a good time to start to build some momentum. And as always, our recommendation is to take small steps that you can do consistently. And so today, as we go about making some changes, we're going to be talking about today the permission to be misunderstood. So this is a common problem many of us experience as we grow and change and make some shifts. We won't be conforming to other people's expectations of us. We might have to set some boundaries. We also might feel disconnected from the people around us. A lot of our drives are to try and relate to other people, and that's where a lot of, people pleasing can happen, or downplaying ourselves, or playing small. This growth path, it is really getting more comfortable with the idea of being misunderstood and just kind of seeing some things like as we grow, we might outgrow the people around us, and that might bring up insecurities and some of that can be painful to see the shifts and changes in people and how they respond to us. And that's not a cue to step back down and fall into the old pattern. It's more of that idea we want to continue to rise through it and, kind of trust that the good relationships, the ones that are meant to stay in our lives, will eventually rebalance out over time. Really, if we're making a change, it has to come from within. It has to be something that's important to us, that's got some motivation behind it. And we need something that's going to be sustainable for you because, there are just these challenges that arise. And I think it's something that isn't talked about a lot where, feeling like you're separating from people or maybe even a bit of an outcast, or you don't really know how to show up in a dynamic with people anymore now that you've kind of got these new things going on in your life. It's a difficult thing. And a lot of times it's one of the more challenging things why we don't get started too, right? Where we're like, if I make these changes, like, is my whole life going to shift? Are people going to not like me anymore? We start to catastrophize a little bit. And so that can kind of take a little bit of the energy out of the momentum that we're trying to build. Today, we're just going to be going through some of these ideas to try and help you out in your changes.
This is a timely topic. You and I talked about it a little bit before we were recording the podcast. But before we jump into that topic and everything about it, we are starting a new segment each week, which will be a question from listeners just for you to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get on with permission to be misunderstood. So today, the question is mostly for me, but I do know from a few folks who listen to the podcast who I chat with that they would also be curious about this. So that is, what are some of your plans or some of the things that you're working on heading into the new year?
Yeah, so I think on a number of fronts, I feel like this is a big year for me to step more fully into everything I'm doing. I did just join a new gym, and I'm going to start working out more and taking care of my health a little bit better. So that's a common one. But, it's just like with my athlete background and such intense training schedules, it was kind of more of I needed this time to have a slower pace with it, but I'm feeling ready to pick that back up and be a little bit more aggressive with it. And, business wise, it's just kind of, a lot of reflecting on the past year of just trying to stabilize things. My summer was super slow, and I'm looking for solutions to, just try and have more offerings for people to fill the gaps, and obviously just do everything on a bigger level. So much of my career was building this skill, and I'm really feeling confident in it now. So now it's about expansion. It's going to be trying to create some experiences, workshops, retreats, also, get more into the corporate arena, maybe working with some teams, things of that nature, and also just provide as much value as possible. We're talking about the social media plan moving forward and trying to, for more bases, it's expansion and just being a little bit more dialed in with things. There's no drastic shifts. It's just more of like a kind of turning it up a notch in a lot of areas of my life. I think that's what's going on is, I've built this foundation, and so now I'm ready to grow at a more rapid pace. So that's the stuff I'm looking forward to in the new year.
Sounds good. So shifting back to our topic, let's talk about being misunderstood a little bit more.
I think initially it is about getting some thicker skin, but I think of a lot of the times, we think we have to like toughen up in order to make this journey, but I think it's about creating space for you to unpack things. As our interactions are shifting with people, there's going to be some triggers that happen. We're going to get pulled into some games, things we used to do, and that's going to hurt our commitment moving forward. So it's more about just creating this like space where I can go spend some time with myself and I can get clarity to rebuild myself after each experience. I'd say that's the most important part of sustaining the journey, is prioritizing time with yourself and getting clear on like, okay, if I had a big challenge come up or I got plugged into some pretty heavy emotions, I want to start to examine that stuff, because those are the things that are going to hold me back. If I can move through that and soften the reactions, now I can start to show up more fully. And so we kind of see it's like, as I'm like growing, there's many people that have maybe been stuck for a long time or have tried to make changes before and couldn't really get out of their own way, or really kind of felt like backlash or not enough support from the people around them. But it's just it's using all those experiences as learning experiences. We want to unpack those things and be like, well, yeah, where did I get off track? Where did I stop to believe? Where did the momentum start to fizzle out? We want to come at this with a more conscious, intelligent lens, where we start to see that most of the things that pull me off track are going to be emotional in nature. And it's going to be pulling at the strings of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy or deserving. It's also going to be pulling at the strings of loyalty. So when I shift and change and relationships are different in my life, a lot of times I feel like I might be betraying the people I love, or I might be betraying my friends. Loyalty can be a trap. We want loyalty to ourselves first and foremost. We don't want to be betraying ourselves constantly, but it's just being more selective about the things we agree to. And I might be unconsciously participating in a lot of patterns that are sabotaging me out of loyalty to family. I feel like I want to relate to them. I want their love and acceptance and approval. And I might, if I veer too far off track of the norms within the status quo within the family system, like I might feel like I'm abandoning others or I'm letting them down. These are all things that are a necessary part of the process. Is, especially with family dynamics, we talk so much about it, that is like your survival unit. That is like the people that you're supposed to ideally feel safe with. Many of us don't. It's kind of seeing that as like, well, we have generational patterns where it's just things were like done a certain way over generations of like, this is just how we do it. This is how we exist, and sets like certain bars for what we feel like we can accomplish for ourselves. A lot of our limitations come from the way we think about things. So if I was born in a lot of struggle and survival, it's going to be hard for me to attach to this bigger vision. I might not feel like I have the worthiness. And these are all common struggles that we have. And so it's just kind of seeing them for what they are. Is if I do things the same way, I'm going to get pretty similar results. Like I'm not going to be able to make the shifts and changes. And so I have to approach things differently. And it is the mental, emotional realm. That's what holds us back. That's what affects our decision making. And I might be holding myself, well, I'm always holding myself back, but I might be using other people as my excuse for why I can't do something. But it's really just how I'm thinking about the situation. If we just kind of we zoom out a little bit, like within the family structure, there's all these things that are, there's the way of being, like this is how we do things. If I branch out from that, I won't be able to relate to people on the same level. I am going to be misunderstood, right? They call that like the black sheep of the family, right? It's like the person that's like different. And in that, when you feel like outcasted, when you feel like different than everybody else around you, that's an uncomfortable place to be. And it's an insecure place to be, right? It's survival. We're safer in the tribe. We're safer in the group. That's how we make our way. And so it's a lot, it's seeing like that. It's not like abandoning everybody. It's what's not working here. Like what does need to change? Like, and it is this ability to zoom out and be like, well, yeah, I see these patterns and this is what produces these results. So how do I need to shift those things within myself in order to get a different result than everybody else in my family? As we take a step out, it's that insecurity and there's a lot of shame that might be projected onto us of like, hey, just kind of fall back into line. And that can be very painful. A lot of it is finding something with enough drive and motivation behind it that, you can fully commit to yourself for maybe the first time. It's having something that, hey, like, I understand that this is going to be a part of the process and it's not going to be easy, but this is like something I need to do for myself or even my soul, right? It's like I feel this calling in my life, and if I'm not pursuing that, then I settle in and just kind of fall into these things. When you see, people that have settled and they aren't very happy with their circumstances in their life, it is a lot of that self-sacrificing. I'd rather be accepted by this group, even if it's at this level that I'm not happy with. It's really the place a lot of dreams go to die is the feedback we get from the people around us, and we let it affect us too much. And then we lose that momentum. And so it's about putting ourselves out there in new ways, and then almost like kind of knowing that as part of the process that there's not everybody's going to understand what I'm doing, but like that doesn't mean I have to drop it. I can stick with it regardless. And working with a lot of triathletes, it is such like an interesting lifestyle that I don't think many people understand, right? Because of the massive commitment it takes, time management, the output on an energy level is just kind of insane. I think it's a beautiful model for if this really matters to me, I actually have to like design my life around it, right? What you'll notice in the triathlon community is triathletes form their own little groups because those are people that like understand each other. But anybody outside, and there's their own language and like this whole tribe thing, but it's like people outside it are just like, yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't really get it. Like, like how do they do all this stuff, right? So that's like a
Sure.
good model for us to look at of like, well, there's not a lot of people that understand that unless they're like doing it, right? And so that's just part of the process. It's like I'm doing this to stay true to myself, and even in that can be limiting, right? So as I go and find my tribe, there might be still some self-sacrificing going on. There still might be like, well, I'm wanting to continue on this different path where maybe everybody else is on this other track, right? So I might have to keep shedding layers of like needing to be accepted or needing to be understood. I might need what got me out of the first version might actually be what's holding me back now. And so I might need to continue to split off. And, because that's saying is when we're empowered to make our own decisions and be who we are authentically, a lot of group structures aren't gonna cut it. It's gonna be like, well, they're on some level, I'm giving up myself to the group. On some level, I'm not being true to myself to exist in this system. And so it's just knowing that that's really the nature of like any system is we're all unique, we're all individuals, we all have our own individual desires. And if I'm getting lost in a group, like I'm not connected to myself. And so the further along you get in anything, a lot of times we have to keep shedding groups. We have to keep shedding the people in our life that don't want to move past that certain point. Okay. But if I stop myself just to exist in that system, that's also a version of settling where I only got so far and then I wanted the comfort of the group again. So much of this, it is an individual path, and that can be very scary to like take full responsibility for yourself and your decisions. And a lot of times you might be kind of feeling like you're hanging out there by yourself, but that's where you truly discover yourself. That's where you get really resilient and strong within yourself is like, I'm willing to walk this path, whether anyone joins me or not. There's levels to all this stuff. And the journey is always about conquering yourself. And it's just like these things have wounds to them. All the times I felt like I wasn't accepted or loved for who I was, or I felt like I had to be something I'm not, or I feel like I have to perform in order to be accepted. Those things, it's in all of our psyches, right? As long as I keep that in play, though, I am going to be sacrificing parts of myself and my journey. And what's good, it's figuring out what's right for you, right? You might hit a certain level and you'll be like, this is good for me now. But there might be other aspects of your life that you might be shutting down where you might want to be exploring those things, but you feel like you can't. So this journey of like being okay with being misunderstood is how you live to your full potential. It is how you truly get rooted and connected deep within yourself is I have to be willing to be out there by myself. And that's terrifying to most of us. And I'm not saying you do that overnight. I'm saying it's this continual process if you want to take that, right?
Yeah, for sure. You touched on a lot of things in that, but the willing to be misunderstood in generational patterns, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that in particular. When you were talking about that, it made me think of, you may have heard this story. It was the story of this woman who every time she cooked a ham, she cut the end off of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And she spends her whole life cutting the end off the ham and then has a daughter. And the daughter starts cooking ham and she's cutting the end off it. And one day she asks, "Why are you cutting the end off of this?" And her mom's like, "Oh, that's the way my mom did it." So the daughter goes back and asks the grandma, "Well, why'd you cut the end off the ham?" And she's like, "Well, because that was how it would fit in the oven that I had."
Hmm.
And it was for no actual reason other than that was the scenario that they were living in at the time.
Hmm.
But then it was just carried on and on
Hmm.
until somebody questioned it and went, "Well, I don't understand.
Hmm.
Tell me more about it." So I thought of that example and I thought maybe you could talk a little bit more because it can be hard to be the one on the outside depending on the type of family that you're brought up in.
I think that's a great example of like it was based on the limitations of what the grandma was dealing with. That set the standard. When we look back to, current, it's like, okay, so there's like the World War II generation, right? And the Depression and all that stuff. And so a lot of those beliefs just get passed down, right? So from,
Right.
these very intense times where there is like a ton of limitation and it is just about getting by, that doesn't stop unless we question it. That doesn't stop until we take a deeper look and be like, well, yeah, why am I doing this? Why is this the way we do it? That's kind of what the black sheep is. It's like the person that can see these things and they're just like, I don't know, like that doesn't make any sense to me. And so you kind of go along with it in childhood because you have to, but then there's that rebellious spirit of, well, I'm going to do things my own way when I can, right? And so, yeah, the generational patterns are so powerful because there's all these things. I don't know anybody like, I don't think it was like common for people in their like in the 30s and 40s to like look at their emotions and try to understand themselves at a deep level. Like when you're in survival, that's kind of all you're doing is trying to get through the day. You're not like questioning life that much. And you always see it with every generation, like thinks they're the best generation and then doesn't understand the one that's coming after. I'm a millennial, so it's like, well, oh yeah, like Gen Z, I don't understand how they do these things, or I don't understand their music or whatever it is.
Whatever.
Yeah, you just see that time and time again. So context is important. It's like, given the environment, given what's going on at the time, like things are going to be vastly different. And it's just kind of understanding that's what life is. It's a constant evolution. Things shouldn't stay the same forever, right? Being able to, there might be principles and ideas that are tried and true. And that's why I like kind of like the spiritual kind of principles that, that like run through everything in life, because it's like that's at least consistent, where you can kind of see it to create awareness. But, a lot of these things, it's just like, yeah, I'm just doing it because this is what I was taught. This is how it was done. And there's always a better way. So that's what like innovation is, right? It's like taking something in its current form and questioning it and being like, how can we make this better? When you innovate, it's like that next version, it is often misunderstood. Like people don't get it, it's like the iPhone or whatever, right? This is a foreign idea. Like everything's just in your pocket now. Every innovation has that where it takes this time to catch up. People don't really, there's early adopters and then there's kind of the middle people. And then there's the people that are like hang on until the end of it that maybe never will get on board. It's kind of seeing that everything's that way. The trailblazers are the ones that are misunderstood and they have the vision and they just move towards it. That goes back to, permission to create, where it's just like, I literally have to dream up something in my head and I have to try and make that happen. In that process, like there is going to be a lot of misunderstandings. Like any good visionary, like they're doing things that are very contrary to everybody else. And then it's just people don't understand it. And then eventually they can see it after a while. But So that's what we're talking about, is this ability to sustain through those moments where nobody really kind of gets it. Nobody knows what you're doing. But that's where all like the great things happen. Is that part of the journey is necessary, because that's what strengthens you to be able to become that thing that you want to become. And it's a part of the process, and it's necessary. As I'm kind of off on my own and I feel like the outcast and nobody understands me, I have to get really strong within myself. It's by design. If I'm going to become an individual, that means I need to separate from the group, and I need to get really clear on who I am and what I want. And it's an uncomfortable place to be. It's based on your standards. If you're cool with like most of it, then, there's not a lot we need to do. But if you're like ambitious and driven, or want a vastly different life, well, then there's going to be a lot of being misunderstood. Through the generations, we just kind of see of like, well, it's not that it was all bad. It was just like, okay, things are different now. So based on the context of now, like what actually makes sense? We don't just throw everything away. We take away the good pieces, right? So, especially, with the boomers and stuff, it's just like all about work, right? It's like let's work hard. Your whole identity is wrapped up in your job. And so that establishes some like pretty cool things, right? Think of all the things that have been built from that mindset. It's seeing that is valuable, but like, does it need to be that way all the time? Like, is work all that needs to matter, right? Or can there be a mixture of things? It's taking the best principles, it's taking the best ideas, and how can I evolve them based on the current context? And there is always going to be a disconnect generationally, where I am going to be misunderstood by the people before me, and I'm going to misunderstand the people beneath me. That's just part of the process, because once again, so much of our wiring is based on the context of that time, right? This is how things were done. That 0 to 7 age range like really sets the foundation for our psychology. And so we have by default a lot of similar patterns within certain eras. It's kind of seeing that, yeah, if people are misunderstanding me, that actually means like I'm on the right track. That means I'm doing things differently. And that's a good thing, even though it can be painful, even though it can be lonely. And yeah, we find people with similar mindsets, we find our tribe. But then I encourage it to be, once you find your tribe, it's just like, that doesn't mean you stop. That doesn't mean you settle in. That means, okay, this might be my tribe for this phase. Do I need to lock into this forever, or can I evolve out of it into different tribes? It's kind of seeing it as like, when I'm done, whenever I say I'm done, right? And if I just keep going, then I continually keep expanding my capacity and getting stronger within myself. And those are the truly special people that, just have this vision that they stick with no matter what. And they don't like care who's around them. That takes a really strong person to get there and to have that tunnel vision. Let's say, I think not everybody wants to be that. And that's why, there's some very powerful innovators that are really like awkward socially and things like that, where it's just like, they don't care about human connection, or they just care about their work and their vision. Not everybody needs to be that way either, right? It can be a balance, but it's knowing that whatever system I'm in, I'm playing a role, and there's certain expectations of me. And if I'm tired of that, and if I'm burnt out on that, I have this power to change myself. As I do that, I might feel some of these things. I might feel a little bit of shame or guilt, or I might feel like I'm abandoning others, or I might feel like I'm not loyal. And those are a lot of the things that stop us. And so it's just kind of seeing it as part of the process. Do I want to live my life to the fullest and continually expand and evolve and always have new desires and move towards them? Or do I want to just stop at certain points, right? Do I only want to go so far? Well, that's a deeply personal question. Some people, they just want the normal things. They don't want to think too much about it. They want a comfortable life. If you're on a growth path and you want to really see what you're made of, like it is going to be this continually like shedding things, unlearning things, continually moving forward. And in that process, like you do like care less and less what other people think, right? Because it's just like, you have to, how you maintain your connection to your vision. And so like when we're first branching out, that's why we need the time and space to be alone with ourselves, to get clear on things. Because when we're around people all the time, now I can't really hear my inner voice. I can't really connect to myself, because there's all these expectations, there's all these dynamics, and I feel pulled and obligated in different directions that might not be true for me. And so that's why we carve out a time to just really, journal, go deeper into what you're thinking and what you want, and question how things have been going for you, questioning the group dynamics around you. And we see this all the time where somebody, maybe they had like an alcohol or a drug issue, and it was just mostly because they were trying to be something they weren't, right? Because they're in this group and that's what everybody does. And then as soon as they get tired of it, they just cut it off and then go off on their own and they just rebuild themselves. That's a pretty common story. That's by design. We need to branch out because we need to create this space where we don't feel all those pulls in the directions that don't feel right for us. It's kind of seeing that, yeah, if everybody exists and bonds over one thing and I choose to no longer participate in that, like, of course I'm going to be misunderstood, right? Yeah, because everybody's relating on this level. And so to exist in that system, I'm going to have to relate on that level to some degree as well. It's seeing that we are meant to like move in different directions, and that's okay. And every time you move in a different direction, there is a grief process. We do have to go through the grieving because we are losing an aspect. But when we lose that aspect, like, what are we filling it with? Are we filling it with something that's better? That's what helps sustain our path, is like when I'm letting go of things, but then I'm also like deeply connected to building this new version.
You explained kind of the question I was going to ask around loyalty, but it did then make me wonder when, a lot of people see loyalty as a value. It's something that's important to them. It's a value that they hold close. It's in some cases it's, you'll hear people make the references of like ride or die or things like that
Mm-hmm.
in relation to loyalty. But my question for you is, are there other values like that might keep someone from moving forward with something in this idea of, well, everybody understands XYZ, and so I hold on to this value and it's keeping me stuck?
Honestly, I think loyalty is like so powerful that it has all these different offshoots to it, where I think that's actually at the root of so many things. So it's hard to like on the spot, it's tough to like come up with an idea that might be as powerful as that. Yeah, because
Do you see like, so the one I think of like is maybe security, but do you see them as the same?
it's going to show up in it because it's going to be like, oh, well, like this is like good enough for us, right? Like we could say
Yeah.
like career wise, financially, the quality of our relationships. It could be because we bond over these things, because when I relate to somebody, that makes me feel seen, heard, loved, and respected, right? But if I have to relate to them on this level and that doesn't feel right to me, it's really, that is what's keeping me in place, is the loyalty to what I know. Okay. There's going to be the fear. There's going to be like, oh, the fear of the unknown, of like what it's going to look like. But like the loyalty keeps me in place because if I branch out, like now I feel like people are going to abandon me. Right. And
Okay.
so with loyalty, we have the abandonment wound, which is like quite possibly the most painful wound that any of us carry. Right. Is like abandoning myself or being abandoned by another when I was in need. Right. And so that, and that's it. So if I'm abandoned, now I immediately go to, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve things, because it's like guilt and shame are like deeply intertwined with it. It's kind of like, I feel like it's got this like subtle undertow across the board to any of these ideas of when I go to make a change, do I automatically feel guilty? Okay. Because if I'm feeling guilty, that means I feel like I'm betraying where I came from.
Sure.
And so that's
Yeah.
going to be coming off that idea of loyalty, of, okay, yeah, we're all together in on this, but if I'm not bought into that, I have to betray myself to exist in that system. And now I'm abandoning myself rather than other people abandoning me. So it's like the loyalty leads to the abandonment piece. It's either I'm abandoning myself to exist in this, or if I branch off, people are going to say I'm abandoning them. Right. It's a complex kind of problem that expresses itself so many different ways, of like, that's what keeps us standing still. And it's really like, yeah, loyalty to where I came from, because if my mindset's like largely formed in that 0 to 7, I feel like by stepping out of those patterns, like I feel like I'm betraying the people that gave those to me. And
Okay.
that creates this deep internal conflict, where it's difficult to move forward because it's just like, oh, I'm going to like lose all these people. And then what does that say about me? It's usually like, oh, I'm a bad person because I made the change. So we immediately get hit with the shame as well. And the shame like really shuts things down. It makes us stuck because we don't know which direction to move because we don't want to be a bad person. But it's like in other people's minds, if we're branching off and being different than them, they might automatically project that guilt and shame onto us. And once again, we're already in this place where we're feeling insecure. It's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just like can't do this anymore. Right. So we don't have the stability and the strength to see through the games when we're first branching out. And so it is very intertwined with this idea of loyalty that it keeps us in place because it means so many things if we're not loyal. And they're generally all negative, so and let's say anybody that branches out from something, whether it's like a religion and they're like, okay, I'm done with that. It's just like, they usually feel terrible about themselves right afterwards. It's like, because you're having to like reorganize your entire mind, because your identity's wrapped into something and now it's not, and you don't know what to do with that. And so you're naturally going to have like ideas of guilt and shame and am I doing the wrong thing? Like there's going to be confusion, dissociation. There's going to be all these things that are going to spring off from it. But it's like, you almost have to go through an emotional withdrawal because that all those things that were anchored in keeping you in the system, that doesn't go away overnight. There's all this like doubt that comes in. There's all these like heavy, intense things where I don't know who I am without the group. A lot of times you see like the best situations are when things are so bad that you like have to leave and you like never look back because
Right.
then it's just like this clear direction. But if you're doing it out of choice of being like, yeah, I can't do this anymore, so I'm going to do something. Now it's like, it wasn't like life or death. It was more of just like, I felt like I was constantly betraying myself. And so it's usually gives us enough to work with, but it's a slower process because, I'm not just like running for the exit. Because when I'm running for the
Right.
exit, it's very clear what I need to do. But a lot of what we talk about here, it's these like subtle manipulations, kind of like gaslighting and things like that, where you're just like, yeah, like I'm like questioning my reality. Like, is this true or is it not? It's not a clear like yes or no. So in those places, you're left in this insecurity, and then you got to like move through and like burn off all the loyalty ideas and see them for what they really are. And that's a very challenging task because a lot of like our identity relies on the group think. It's like, oh, this is who I am. But like when I'm not there with that anymore, I have to discover who I am. And that's like an evolving process where I just like, it takes like isolation. It takes time being alone. And those are deeply uncomfortable things, especially on that first phase of it. And so yeah, I think that is like one of the big challenges of like most people, like they feel guilty about outgrowing the people around them. And it's just like, well, I'd rather have the group. So I'm going to like start to shut it down and suppress myself so that I don't ruffle too many feathers here. But, eventually, if I'm choosing to continually build, like it is going to hit a breaking point where I do need to detach. It's a very difficult thing for most people to do also because we want the next thing before we let go of the old thing. And,
Yes.
and a lot of times we need to let go of the old thing to create the space for the next thing. So, generally it's not a super smooth transition. It's like a building up and then I take a leap. And that leap, usually it's like uncomfortable for a while before I find the next thing.
So let's talk a little bit about that the signs that you're like doing the thing, that you've hit that willing, like it's the first you have to be willing, right? But then past that, there's going to be things that are going to start to show up for you where you've like fallen into it and you're okay with it. Maybe let's talk about that part.
I think you're going to have to like sit in it long enough to like see the flaws in all of it and be like, I can't live my life that way. Right. Cause it's more painful to go back than it is to go through the pain to keep going. I think there is this point of like, I'm going to be questioning things for a while. And, a lot of people like don't know what to do with that, and I think it's why I'm here in Nashville. So, there's all these musicians trying to make it. Right. And it's just like, you just kind of think of like what that takes to like, barely scrape by, and you just really have to believe in yourself. A lot of times, everybody's telling you you're not going to make it and it's stupid. Like, why try? Like all that stuff. And you just keep backing it up with more action about what you're trying to create. And I think it is like in the slow times, you really feel the gravity of all the guilt and shame and being disloyal and abandoning others, where it's like, I think a lot of people fall into a depression, right? In that initial phase, because it's like you're having to rebuild and reorient your mind, but it's like designed to like strip you of all that stuff. So going through the pain is supposed to strip you of the things that you can get even stronger in your commitment to the direction you're heading. And that's why most people don't do it. We admire people that make it all the way, right? Make it to the top, because I think on some level, there's a recognition of how difficult that is, where you really have to, there's some like versions where, once again, like it depends on your upbringing. If you have a family that really supports your dreams and tells you can do whatever you want, like I think that path's a lot easier, where you don't feel like you're fighting everybody constantly. But other ones where it's like there's a lot of limitation, survival thinking. A lot of those things are stupid, of like, especially all the creative fields. When you're in survival and you're just worried about the next paycheck, like going to do something you love is like a total foreign idea. It is always like met with, when you're branching out, there's like tons of struggle in those initial stages, like before you can get your feet underneath you. And so not only are you branching off, but then, and that was hard to begin with, but then you get tons of shame about like how you should just do the safe thing again. That generally pulls you back. I mentioned that as like the gauntlet of like, that's a necessary part of the process, to be shamed for being different, because that's what strengthens you to connect deeper in with yourself, to do things because you want to do them. And you start to shed those ideas that like bind you to the old way of being. And it's a gradual process where it is about coming to terms with, hey, I'm actually not a bad person. I'm just doing something differently, right? It's just getting to an objective place where, yeah, this was extremely difficult, but it was worth it because I got stronger every step of the way, right? I became more dependent on myself than other people. And so it's really this refinement process where you're like burning off a lot of the limitation, and you just get lighter as you go, but then you actually deepen your conviction in yourself, right? So that's the self belief part that we talked about last week, where once I like really get anchored in myself, I'm okay with being misunderstood, because I care way less, because it's not a matter of life and death anymore. It's like I have enough data within my system that proves that I'm making progress and that I'm on the right track, and that I just have to stick with this thing, and good things will happen. The criticism and the crowd, like it just carries less and less weight, because you're actively involved in the process every day. Like, what you're doing. If you're not backing it up with any action, like, yeah, you're not gonna build that confidence. But it is about that ability to put yourself out there time and time again, unpack the different experiences to grow stronger from them, rather than just get weighed down by them. And then if I get buried by it, if I'm not unpacking things, if I'm seeing everything as all or none, or good or bad, or success or failure, if I'm doing in the binary thinking, it's going to be very difficult to make progress, because my standard's off, right? I need to be able to see the nuance of the situation of like, oh, I'm doing better in this area than I was yesterday. But maybe the outcome wasn't what I wanted it to be, but I'm seeing how I'm actually getting better. Okay. So that's the stuff that sustains us on the path, is I have to be able to see progress that's happening as a result of my work. And so that's where you really start to get your legs underneath you, is when you can recognize that I've actually grown dramatically. And then as I'm growing now, all the other stuff seems kind of stupid. It's like I'm in this day in and day out. I might see this other person like once a month or once a year. It's like, what do they know about what I'm doing on a daily basis? It's always about that work you're doing when nobody's watching. That's like the X factor, is like, are you actually backing this up? Like, are you spending time with it to get stronger? Because if you're just saying you want it, and then you might take a couple shots, but if they didn't go well, okay, I failed, I might as well like go back to this, right? That's because you didn't put in the work. You didn't keep working the puzzle. And so you don't have that sense of self, or you're not rooted in confidence, because you're not actually doing the work. And so that's where we're going to fall back every time, because there's no foundation behind it. So it is about allowing all the old stuff to burn off while we're in the process of continually working at something. And that's where we really get the strength behind it, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks, because like I know what I'm doing on a daily basis. And everybody else's judgments are just kind of snap judgments of like whatever their projections of like many people don't go after they want what they want. Most people don't change very much. And so when they see people outgrowing them, when they see people making things happen that, maybe they wanted to do, that's where you get the shame. That's where you get all the projections. It's kind of seeing it as like their unfulfilled life. It's seeing it as their insecurities. And like, do I need to live my life based on somebody else's insecurities? Does that help anybody? That person didn't have the courage. Maybe they didn't even have any bigger thoughts for themselves. They just don't want to see other people do well. It just depends on where the person's functioning from. And so, the further along you get, it's like you see that the opinions that matter are the ones that have actually gone through a similar path. The ones that have like kind of pushed through those stages, not the people that have been on the sidelines all the time. Because their opinion is just based on their own bitterness, right? It's based on them not going after things or not allowing themselves to. And that opinion's it's not well formed, and it actually it's going to be filled with misunderstandings because they haven't actually lived anything that you're doing. So like, how would they know?
Yeah, it's very much the Theodore Roosevelt man in the arena
Yeah.
thing. So to close this one out, what are kind of your thoughts or the takeaways that you want to share for people about being misunderstood?
Yeah, I think it's just this ability to kind of sit in the gap, to not immediately jump back to old ways of being. It is being patient with yourself. It's allowing things to unfold. It's allowing you to wrestle with new ideas, and it's an uncomfortable place to be. The seeking the love, approval, and validation of others is what keeps us standing still. And that's saying is that we're all here to live our own life. It's what might make me happy might not make you happy. We all have different preferences. It's up to us to decide what those are. And if I'm not pursuing those things, like I am going to get plugged into bitterness and resentment and all that stuff because it's going to be all this unlived life. It's going to be, I didn't go after the things I wanted. And then my life kind of just happened by default. I wasn't doing anything consciously. And so that might be a mixed bag. There might be some good things in there, but like largely it's probably, if you haven't done the inner work, it's going to be like a version of what your parents lived. We look at that stuff and it's like, hey, do I want that life? And if I want something different, like this is the process. I do have to separate. I do have to get clear on what I want. I have to reprogram my mind to see things differently, because that's how I'm going to be able to see opportunities. And that's how I'm going to be able to see my next steps is by detaching to the old ways of being. And so it's an unlearning process every time. So it's just, we're choosing myself. It's choosing what I want. And that doesn't mean I'm selfish. A lot of the guilt that's projected onto us, a lot of that game is because we play a role for other people and they benefit from it. They want us to be a certain type of person so that they can get what they want from us. That's actually them being selfish, to be honest with you. So the way I coach and teach is like, you don't have to require things of other people. You don't have to hurt other people to get what you want. If you build yourself the right way, nobody else is holding you back. And you also don't have to walk all over other people to get there. When we're stepping out of these roles, that's where we get the shame and guilt. And it's because we have these codependencies set up where people have learned that we meet certain expectations for them. And if we pull away, then they get upset with us and try to rein us back in. It's just kind of seeing that if those things are happening, that's a sign you're on the right path. That's a sign that, like there's a shift in me and they're noticing the shift and they want to go back to the old way, right? It's only our participation in the old way that keeps it going. So I just have to continually reinforce where I'm heading. And, eventually I'll start to find my legs with that. But it's knowing that it's an insecure place. It's uncomfortable. We often talk about this need to, if you're going to grow, you like have to be uncomfortable. It's part of the process. You can't avoid it, but it's uncomfortable because you're challenging your old mindset. You're challenging where you've come from. You're challenging all the beliefs that were passed down to you. That's going to create discomfort in the nervous system. It's just your mind has fixed thinking around something and we're trying to expand it and open it up to see other possibilities for yourself. Right. And so that's really all it is like, if I'm doing things vastly different than where I've come from, like there is going to be a ton of misunderstandings and I have to learn to be okay with that. And the longer I'm on the path, the more, and honestly, it doesn't matter. It's just getting out of the gate. It's just sticking with something long enough to burn off some of this old stuff. That's like the main idea to all this thing. It's just, we need consistency. We need, you need to continually connect to your vision. What are some next steps I can take? What's holding me back? Meaning, what emotions and mindset are limiting me from moving forward? And that's the piece I need to unlock and overcome. Because once I dissolve those limitations within myself, now I free myself up to move forward more powerfully. I stop hesitating as much. I stop people pleasing. I stop giving into things. I just keep getting stronger. But it is coming to peace with those internal conflicts. It's resolving those loyalties. It's shifting them. And the thing is, I'm not talking about like abandoning your family or like anything like that. It's just, well, like, I want to do things differently than them. They have expectations of me, and I have to be willing to disappoint them in order to stay true to myself. That means like I need to take the steps that are right for me, because if I don't, I'm going to be holding on to bitterness and resentment towards those people anyway, which is going to be damaging to the relationship. So like, you pursuing what you want is actually for a better outcome within a family system. It's actually, it makes healthier relationships over time once you get over the initial conflict of being different. But it's this ability to stick with things through those phases so that you can get stronger. And then once again, on the other side of it, generally it's healthier relationships because you're not having to betray yourself so much. And when I stop meeting those expectations of others, those people that have those expectations of me, they learn to fill that gap other ways, like where they're not depending on me for the same stuff. And so they learn to meet those needs other ways. And so that also frees me up and helps the dynamic as well. So misunderstanding is part of that process initially, to be like, yeah, I don't want the same things as you, so I have to go this way. And you have to trust that eventually people will get over it. Especially, with family, that's one of the benefits of loyalty, is that generally you can go through these phases and people will still love you at the end of the day. You might not agree on everything, but when you have those deep roots with another person, generally you can put things to the side and let them go over time. Where with like newer relationships, that's not the case. Like, if there's not the loyalty there to anchor you to them. So if I make these changes, that person's probably going to disappear from my life. But with family, they're usually like there in most cases, where I can work through these challenges, and then over time we can reconnect on a different level, but the relationship will look much different.
All right, cool. So, just like always, do you want to tell people the best places to find you and what they can do if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah, so if you're looking to make some big changes here in 2026, I'd be happy to help you. If you would like to have a conversation, I offer a free 30-minute strategy session. You can book that on my website, brandonthielk.com. I just get a sense of what's going on with you and how I can help you forward through the challenges you're experiencing. Also, you can register for my newsletter on my website. I send out the lightning report each Monday. That's just a recap of what's going on in the business, and as well as some insights for the week, some prompts to help you work through some of this deeper stuff. If you want to follow along on YouTube and Instagram at Brandon Thielk, I post out there pretty regularly. Also TikTok at bthielk. So please like, subscribe, comment, reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you.
And if you have a question for Brandon for our new segment, please, you can DM that. You can send it to the podcast at Brandon Thielk email. If you know one of us personally, you can text it. Any of those things will work to get a question to us. And if you got something out of this podcast today and you know someone who might also get something out of it, super helpful to us if you could share a link to the pod. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
All right. Talk to you later, Brandon.
Bye.